Imagine sitting across from someone who has known you for years. Maybe it's an old friend, maybe it's a family member, maybe it's someone who once felt like home. You're talking, laughing, going through the same familiar rhythms of conversation. But inside, something feels different. Not wrong, just different. Their words sound the same as they always have. Their opinions haven't changed. Their patterns are still familiar. But you notice something strange. You no longer see the world through the same lens. And the moment you realize this, something uncomfortable rises inside you. Not pride, not relief, guilt. A quiet, heavy guilt that whispers, "Who do you think you are now?" You start questioning yourself. Maybe I'm being arrogant. Maybe I'm forgetting where I came from. Maybe I'm abandoning people who were always there for me. But here is the paradox that almost no one talks about. Growth often feels like betrayal, because when you change your mindset, your habits, your emotional boundaries, you also change the invisible contracts that once defined your relationships. And those contracts were never written down, but they were deeply understood. Stay the same. Don't question too much. Don't evolve too far. Don't become someone unfamiliar. When you begin to grow beyond those unspoken rules, something subtle happens. The environment that once felt comfortable begins to feel constricting. You begin noticing conversations that revolve around the same complaints, the same fears, the same patterns that once felt normal. And suddenly you find yourself standing between two painful choices. Stay the same to keep the peace, or grow, and risk losing people who once mattered deeply to you. This emotional conflict is what psychologists call relational dissonance, and it is one of the most misunderstood experiences of personal growth. Because the truth is this, outgrowing people doesn't always happen because you stopped caring. Sometimes it happens because you finally started becoming who you were meant to be. To understand the guilt of outgrowing others, we have to look at the psychology of belonging. Human beings are wired for connection. Our nervous systems evolved around tribes, families, and communities where acceptance meant survival. In early childhood, belonging is not optional. It's essential. This is why many people develop what psychologists call attachment-based loyalty patterns. As children, we subconsciously adapt ourselves to maintain emotional safety within our environment. If the family system values silence, we become quiet. If the family system values obedience, we suppress our opinions. If emotional expression is discouraged, we learn to hide vulnerability. Over time, this creates something called relational identity. Your sense of self becomes intertwined with the expectations of your environment. You are not just you. You are the version of you that keeps relationships stable. But as personal development begins, through education, introspection, or exposure to new ideas, this relational identity starts to evolve, and evolution creates friction. One psychological concept that explains this is cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance occurs when new beliefs conflict with old environments. Your internal world begins to change, but your external world may remain the same. This tension creates emotional discomfort, not only within you, but within the people around you. Another important concept here is homeostasis in social systems. Just like the body resists sudden change, social groups also resist shifts in identity. When someone in a system begins to grow, question, or evolve, the group often reacts unconsciously, not necessarily with hostility, but with subtle pressure to return to familiar patterns. Comments like, "You've changed," "You think you're better than us now?" "You used to be different." These responses are not always malicious. They are often expressions of psychological equilibrium being disturbed, because when one person evolves, it forces everyone else to confront their own stagnation, and that can be deeply uncomfortable. Carl Jung once said something profoundly simple. Loneliness does not come from having no people around you, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to you. This is the quiet tragedy of outgrowing people. The distance is rarely physical, it's psychological. You may still see the same friends, attend the same gatherings, share the same memories, but internally something feels disconnected. You notice conversations that once energized you now leave you drained. Topics that once felt exciting now feel repetitive. Values that once seemed unquestionable now feel limiting. And the strange part is, you didn't intentionally create this gap. It appeared naturally, as your awareness expanded, as your emotional boundaries strengthened, as your priorities shifted, and yet the guilt remains. Why? Because many people carry a deep belief formed early in life. Loyalty means staying the same. If your identity was built around being the supportive friend, the agreeable sibling, or the reliable member of the group, then growth can feel like betrayal. You may feel like you're abandoning people who once accepted you, but what you're actually confronting is something psychologists call identity differentiation. The process of becoming an individual separate from the collective identity you once depended on. And differentiation is rarely comfortable because it involves something painful. Letting go of roles that once made you feel safe. You might grieve the simplicity of old friendships. You might miss the version of yourself who didn't question so much. You might wonder whether personal growth is worth the emotional distance it creates. This is what philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche described when he wrote, "The snake which cannot shed its skin must perish." Growth requires shedding identities, but shedding identities can also mean shedding relationships built around them, and that is where the invisible grief lives. The guilt of outgrowing others shows up in subtle ways in adulthood. You might notice it in your relationships. You might feel hesitant to talk about your goals because you fear being misunderstood. You might downplay your progress to avoid making others uncomfortable. You might remain silent about personal insights that have changed your worldview, not because you lack confidence, because you don't want to create distance. You might notice it in your career. You may feel pressure to remain in environments that no longer challenge you. You may hesitate to pursue opportunities that would separate you from familiar communities. Success begins to feel emotionally complicated, not simply rewarding, but isolating. You might notice it in your self-worth. You may question whether personal ambition makes you selfish. You may struggle with the belief that growth equals disloyalty. You might notice it in boundaries. People who outgrow environments often become adults who feel responsible for everyone's comfort. They soften their opinions. They dilute their authenticity. They hide their evolution, and you might notice it in emotional regulation. Moments of progress may be followed by waves of guilt, a new mindset, a new habit, a new level of awareness, followed by the quiet thought, am I leaving people behind? But here is the important realization. Growth is not abandonment, it is alignment. The discomfort you feel is not evidence that you're doing something wrong. It is evidence that your identity is evolving beyond the roles that once defined it. And awareness is the beginning of unlearning. Not forcing yourself to detach from others, but allowing yourself to grow without self-punishment. Healing the guilt of outgrowing others begins with redefining loyalty. Loyalty does not mean shrinking yourself to preserve familiarity. Loyalty means honoring your authentic development while still holding compassion for those who are walking a different path. One of the most powerful practices in this process is inner child reparenting. When you reconnect with the younger version of yourself, you begin recognizing how many of your relational patterns were shaped by the need to belong. You begin offering yourself the permission that may have been missing earlier in life. Permission to evolve, permission to change, permission to become unfamiliar. Another powerful process is shadow work. Shadow work involves examining the guilt, fear, and resistance that surface when you step into personal growth. Often these emotions reveal deeper beliefs about worthiness and belonging. By bringing these beliefs into awareness, you begin dissolving their unconscious control. The third step involves nervous system regulation. Growth can trigger feelings of social threat because the brain associates separation from familiar groups with danger. Practices like mindfulness, breathwork, and somatic awareness help the nervous system understand that change does not equal abandonment. And perhaps the most important shift is choosing softness over survival mode. You don't need to reject the people from your past. You simply need to accept that not every relationship is meant to evolve at the same pace. Some people walk beside us for a season, others for a lifetime, but every relationship plays a role in shaping who we become. The poet Rainer Maria Rilke once wrote, "Be patient toward all that is unsolved in your heart, and try to love the questions themselves. The guilt you feel is not a sign that you are abandoning people. It is a sign that you are becoming conscious of your own transformation. And transformation is rarely comfortable, but it is necessary, because the goal of growth is not to become someone superior. It is to become someone authentic." So if this message resonates with you, If you've ever felt the quiet guilt of evolving beyond the version of yourself others expected, consider sharing this video with someone who might be navigating the same journey. And if you'd like to explore more conversations about psychology, emotional healing, and the deeper patterns that shape human behavior, feel free to subscribe, because the truth is this: you are not betraying your past by growing. You are honoring the person you were always meant to become. And remember this: the goal is not to be fixed. The goal is to become whole.